Pinkertons Ghosts is a horror anthology podcast by Superversive Radio, with no affiliation with any detective agency, person, real or imagined, or the dark forces of Outre-Terre. It is not intended for children.
Jack Morrow here. I had an itch I needed to scratch, and Control came through. You rarely know what you need until you get it. Jack, we found a potential lead on the puppeteer. Between Sullivan and Rolla, Missouri is an abandoned mall off Missouri J. Workers employed to deconstruct the building have been reporting strange events, including loss of motor function, co-workers acting strangely, and mannequins moving around. We have been hired to solve the issue. Solve the issue, Jack. Control knows me too well. It's time to make the puppeteer pay. I loaded for bear. I had been putting together a padded suit for more protection. A little Kevlar, a little ceramic plates. I'm not much of a craftsman, my trade is violence after all, but with some help, I put together something that should keep my delicate body in one piece. I worked with an armorer, Mercy introduced to me, to set up my holsters for my guns and knives. I even found room to add some new toys. I dropped slivers of time on my draw, and I tended to lose less equipment if I was struck. The stress tests were very successful. There are more abandoned malls like this than you think. It was constructed, but did not survive the recession. It's off the beaten path enough to be its own thing, but close enough to population centers to matter. Not a great place, though. Then again, malls were hot then, and were the center of social life for the American culture pre-internet. Well, pre-popular internet. They're dying the slow death only multi-billion-dollar real estate companies can. Now the abandoned ones rot if they're not in good residential or commercial areas. I have done some urban exploration, scouting out new safe houses and the like. They're sounder than one might think, but the feel of people, of commerce, remains like a weight. The mall, which was so new when it failed they hadn't finalized the name yet, squatted in the middle of a conceptually unlimited space of parking lots. Something had happened and the asphalt had rippled, cracking like ice over a turbulent sea. I barely found a place to park. Saturdays can be packed. I'm just glad I got a place so close to the entrance. The construction equipment had been abandoned by the workers. I passed through the crates and tools into the main entrance, which had been propped open. You could feel that people were meant to be here. I had been told that all fires are the same fire, and that all hospitals were the same hospital. I also felt the same way in mortuaries, but never churches. All malls are the same mall. Sure, some have different stores in them, or they're more like meeting grounds than places of pure business, but they all feel the same hunger for people to step into them, the same drive to be occupied, to be a place of business, or I couldn't tell you what. It's about a hunger for the human soul. This wasn't a burnt-out house grown hateful of any inhabitant, or a hungry funeral home as welcoming as a hug. Only because this mall never fledged, never welcomed any soul, I was an intruder haunting a sacred grove. After the propped open sliding doors, which could have been anywhere sliding doors, I saw rows of uninhabited stores and restaurants. The mall had one floor above, one floor below. Stairs and escalators were alike, and dust and guano covered the glass, obscuring the sun. The remains of the store's eventual owners could be seen, or at least guessed. A cheesecake factory here, a game store there, a pretzel kiosk, a sunglasses kiosk, some resale store, and so on and so on. The second floor was well lit, and distributed light below it through large, about 3-story length holes or wells that touched the first floor. At the end of every hole was a thick walkway, too thick to be mentally anything but solid ground, but light enough to break an expanse of tile and dust-laden plastic plants. Each store was an island of dark. I could see still functioning red exit signs and the flashes of gaudy aughts decoration, but the whole weight of the dark holes interrupted the sunlight streaming down, a corridor of light and rows of squatting dark nothings. I felt lighter than air, exposed. I might be eaten if I searched the dark caverns. I found nothing, so I went one floor down. On the first floor, the light rained down in a current straight below. The remains of light diffused through the area. Nothing was as dark as the empty holes above, but the gray oppressed me. You could almost imagine what should have been: the crowds, the shopping, the strange mix of socialization and things people truly did not need, but needed all the same. I relish being alone. But sometimes there's a magic to people, and the place is built for them. I found nothing on the first floor. That left one floor below. It wasn't a full floor, going the full length and width of the other floors. Just a single peninsula of shops and kiosks stretching into the dark gray shadows. By some trick of the architecture, light diffused down the stairs and into the hall. Even in a loss of power, there would still be enough light to see where you were going. I wondered if the puppeteer had left, spooked by the workers. No joy, I'm sure. These things of the Autre Terre don't like to move for some no-threat construction workers. It's part of the reason that hauntings happen, or evil objects stay around one house. Sometimes it's not even about comfort or remaining memories. It's just where they happen to be, and they don't want to leave. I still wasn't sure what the puppeteer was. Maybe it followed the same rules. I haven't mentioned it so far, but I had prepared myself for the beast. Jim Donavan had worked with the spindle from my first encounter with it, and turned it into a protective ward. It was an object that kept mind control and the monster's strings off me. I could be hypnotized or overpowered, but I could not be easily taken, as I had before. We had no joy in testing it against the actual puppeteer, but that wouldn't be a problem for long. The hall was long. Some store, a Macy's or Sears, had anchored it at the far end, but the entrance of this level was farther into the store space than the other two levels. Clothing stores, the remains of fashion a decade and a half gone, lined every side. And in one, deep in the back, behind the registers, was a mannequin. You know, just standing there, minding its own business. It was waving one arm. No motion, just a gesture of a wave. It was wearing moth-eaten clothing. I did not enter the store. Now, I couldn't rule out pranks, but when have I ever had the reason to distrust control? I wanted to shoot it, but I figured it would be a distraction, or the flash would ruin my sight. The next store down had several of the blasted white fiberglass things standing around, pretending they're people. A wife was holding a shirt to a man's back. A pair of female mannequins were pointing at shoes. A male mannequin had been broken apart so that his pieces were popped up in a bored expression. Several piles of moth-eaten clothing sat next to him. I took a few steps back. The first mannequin had moved around, so it was attending an empty rack, holding up a single coat hanger that swayed in the non-existent breeze. I checked my ward surreptitiously, like I was massaging my chest. Still there. I could feel a little electrical charge from it. I hate magic and magicians, but it was probably saving my bacon right here. The third store was a shoe depot. All the shoes were gone from this one, but I could still see little Billy getting fit. The cracks in the mannequins where he had been broken into his pose clear as day. One of the register mannequins had a bubble of gum calcified and dry, but still gamely hanging on to her mouth. I tripped on a couple fingers that were not there on the floor a minute ago and tumbled. I got to my feet fast as thought. Mannequins were all around me. They weren't looking at me. They were walking, frozen in time. Some were entering such and such a store. A trio of men were leaving some rugged outfitter. A teen girl model with a snapped-off ponytail waved to a teen boy who was merely the shorter and smaller version of all the male mannequins. A lone female stood, looking into the dry fountain. I wanted to leave. Not because I feared being attacked. I did, but that's never a good enough reason to run. No, I felt awkward. I couldn't distinguish them from people for a moment. Not long, I knew what they were, but for a second I was surrounded by people in an area I wasn't comfortable in. Like I said, I relish being alone. It's enjoyable for me. Ever since I have been training the newbies, it's been less lonely. I know where the old Shawnee haunts, cursing white men and enemy tribes who have been dead 100 years. I convinced Mr. Henderson to set up shop away from New Orleans, and in an Ozark strip mall I kept around for an office, and ways to pay off property taxes. I'm building something small, but it's mine. But it is small, and it'll always be that kind of exclusive club. The Paranormal Pinkertons are big enough for me. I am beginning to like the meetings. Seeing Control talking to Eugene and the others, it's small, controlled, and I know who's going to be there ahead of time. I can't say that about this press. People all around me, not even looking at me, just being there, living lives, pushing around me, going places. None of them knew anything about the Autre-Terre or the Grand Masons, or that their tax money was going to Days. Even if they were a deep lore conspiracy theorist, they never get past the plain old Freemasons. It didn't matter that these things weren't moving, that they were fake and cracked if I put my hand on them. For that second I thought I was an oppress of humanity. Their lives stifled me. I wanted to lash out against them. I wanted to scuttle into a vent and wait for the lights to go out so I could have my ease of leaving. I stood perfectly still, waiting to be touched or pushed around, or someone to comment on the weird man. I begged God to keep me from being noticed. I never went in for that little trick of hiding my face with magic or hypnotism. I knew how to ruin camera angles. That's why I move my body the way I do. This may seem odd or not so odd if you know me. I find the lives of people to be strange things. They make choices that end up hurting them. I've watched a drug-out, slap-slap argument turn into a kiss-kiss argument in the course of a minute. I've listened to conversations where someone just agrees to make a choice that they would regret. People I am a part of that mass, that press of souls. I am grateful God loves us. He knows it's hard enough for us to love each other. Then sanity returned, and I remembered that they were all mannequins. I pushed the nearest one. It rocked back up to the balls of its feet, swaying twice before going still. It was hanging from a thread. I heard rustling and clicks behind me. The mannequins had moved forward, backwards, wherever, in the reasonable guise of a mob of shoppers going about their business. The puppeteer was taunting me. I walked forward, taking the path of least resistance. I slipped through the crowds, not touching them when I could. I entered the expansive floor of the former department store. I felt it then, something like a finger caressing my mind. I grabbed it. It was a silver thread. It slipped out of my glove, pulled into the cracks of the ceiling tiles above. This store, like the rest of the mall, was 3 floors tall. I was about to ascend to the floors above to continue the search when I saw a set of mannequins, broken and discarded. I had damaged the puppeteer when it took me over in the Puppeteer's Returns mission. I didn't run, but I switched my 1911 for the 1887 and moved with purpose. I passed through a silvery curtain of the strings. Only a few touched bare skin. I could feel it reach out to me. Before, it was just a prank. It wanted me, not that it recognized me, to stay away from it. It would have done something to scare me, but not dominate me. What is scarier than your own body rebelling against you? If the mannequins did not work, this would. Now, it touched me and recognized me. I knew that it experienced some feedback. How could it control without any of the sensations of control? I sent it hate. I sent it my desire to kill it. I wanted it dead. I wanted it dead now. I was screaming within my own head my hatred for it. If it rotted in this fiberglass and plastic body forever, I would be dissatisfied that it was not suffering enough. And more, it was not about being conscious, but about the hating. I charged through. The threads retracted like a clam taking back its feeders. I passed the remains of an office and an eyeglass store and burst through into a security office. I heard clicking and clacking. I did not look but fired a shot through a mannequin coming through a side door. The sound was fleshy. A bullet in the flesh, not a bullet shattering the hollow shell of a sales model. I turned to him, a human in shell-like armor. I had loaded slugs into my 1887 for the shattering power, and it had torn a hole through the soft part of his abdomen. The body slumped to the floor, writhing. I ran to it, my bowie knife cutting through the threads as he lay still. Then I saw that his blood was not flowing. It was purplish, sluggish, solid. I saw the discoloration, the dryness of the body. This man had been dead and mummified for years. Maybe a drug addict, pickled on his own supply. Maybe the puppeteer had murdered him and curated his body. No time to check. I threw myself to the side before I even consciously felt the weight of the puppeteer. Its grasping hands missed me by inches. My 1887 did God's work and blew away the first rank of hands as they reached for me. More poured out of the black door, grabbing me, twisting me around, trying to pull the gun from my hands. I let them pull my right arm aside, but my left arm had pulled out my holdout G45. I had expanded my personal arsenal for situations like this, and in the end, I discovered that the 24-round magazine was the most I could fit comfortably under my coat. I nearly emptied the magazine when the remaining arm slapped it out of my hands. It was pulling itself into my sight. It was bigger than before. I couldn't see the mark I had made on it the last time. It pushed me down, but a shot into its shoulder broke its grip on my coat. The main body reared back and tackled me. It didn't have the weight. I looked into its black eyes. I fired the 1887 twice into its fiberglass guts. It didn't scream, but it threw me to the side, and I know I had heard it. I popped open the 1887 and replaced the slugs with a double-aught buckshot. Now that I've cracked it, I wanted to scramble it like an egg. I caught the tail end of it, jumping into the mass of mannequins going about their lives, but there were more of them now, facing the department store entrance. The puppeteer entered with barely a ripple of the ranked mannequins, like an expert high diver. I saw its arms reach out and flail for the barest of seconds. Then it was still. I bet it wanted me to follow. I'm angry, not stupid. I pulled out my grenades. I had 3, but they do work. In quick succession, I threw them into the mass and put my back to the support pillar. The explosion caused a lot of shrapnel and dust. I ran into the mass before the chips of fiberglass started to fall. The dust caused me to choke, so I backed out long enough to put on a mask. I heard metal rasp on concrete and saw the metal grate over the guts of the fountain to fall back. The puppeteer had gone down into the sewer system. I couldn't follow it. Half because I couldn't fit, half because getting stuck in an abandoned mall sewer is a horrid way to die. Well, there was always next time. It did shed much of its body to escape me. Trophies are trophies, after all. I collected what I could and left it in a pile. Investigating the security office brought a nest and not much else. It slept in a massive pile of itself, I guessed. No eggs to smash, no little versions of itself to kill off. I checked the body in the fiberglass suit. Dead for years. No ID or wallet. There's a missing persons case that's about to be solved, I guess. I'll leave the body to you, Control. I have no desire to explain to the police why I shot the poor bastard. Wrath has its advantages in this job, but really it causes more problems than it's worth. My lungs are burning, the puppeteer escaped, and I could have killed an innocent man here. I staked the building for a few days after. No changes. The puppeteer is gone. It's not dead, but it's run off somewhere. I had no joy finding a trail out from the nearest sewer exits or entrances. There's probably something I'm missing. Puppeteer's still out there, damn it. Jack Morrow, out.
Pinkerton's Ghosts is a podcast distributed by Superversive Radio, licensed under an attribution non-commercial, share-alike international license. This episode was written by Ben Wheeler and is performed by the same. Ben Wheeler edits, directs, produces, and herds cats. Kid Dickerson performs our audio editing. Visit us on Facebook, read articles on superversivesf.com, or listen to us on unauthorized Acast, iTunes, or Spotify. Contact us through Twitter at @PinkertonsGhost, email us at pinkertonsghosts@gmail.com, or send us noble messenger possums with messages strapped to their backs. Don't worry, they know how to find us. Thank you for listening, and good luck.